When it came to Equinor, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to deal with this in Norway? Unlike BP, Equinor is a majority state-owned company. But what we knew was over there, we needed to make this an issue for their major shareholder, which was the government, and therefore the Norwegian people. We were really fortunate to be able to invest in working with a Norwegian communications consultant, which was critical in terms of getting media out into Norway. It became really apparent to us that Equinor only cared so much about what the Australian community thought. Their social licence in Norway is critically important, and the amount of advertising they do in their own country to ensure that was really apparent. Last year, because of support from donors and some of our allies, we were able to take a delegation to Norway, to the AGM, and within the strategy, we were able to take a paddle out to Norway itself, which was amazing, but I have to tell you, terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. The idea of trying to organise something like that in another country, in a place you've never been, in a location you've never been, when the water is freezing, and unlike Australians, every Norwegian doesn't have something that can float in their garage. We knew that we had to really get to the surfers, like the serious surfers that are prepared to get in the full dry suit to be able to make that work. It was amazing when hundreds of Norwegians turned up to help us do that.
You know, going to another country and, you know, to facing, you don't know what to expect, but, you know, when you find that we had amazing support, you know, even from some Norway people, you know, because when we were speaking in front of the crowd and we went to Parliament House, but when we spoke at the Opera House, when we'd done that paddle out there, that day, I got up and talked and we sang a few songs, and I asked the people, I said, okay, hands up who's the one that had shares in Equinor, you know, and they were all hands come up, and, you know, most of the parents had the little kids and babies, and, you know, when I told them that, I said, you know what, your money, the money that you're going to get for your shares, if you get any, it's blood money that you're going to get, because they're killing, destroying the sea and killing all the marine life. Some people had tears in their eyes, you know, when I was singing the Jidra song. So you know, when you see that, you know, it's a heartfelt moment too, you know. And
we knew that we needed to really ramp it up. But it was really pivotal, I think, because it captured the interest and the minds of journalists over there, who then consistently wrote about this issue in Norway. Over there, you can get journalists asking very pointed questions. They don't accept whatever someone says, they interrogate it. And so having them on side and prepared to interrogate this pivotal company for that country was really crucial in being able to change the narrative and actually become part of the national debate over there. We wanted to make sure that whenever this project went to the Equinor board to make a final investment decision on the rig, that board knew there were going to be real ramifications for that company if they pushed ahead.
It's been quite a humbling and inspiring process to work with community groups right across the country who have come together, who have joined the Great Australian Bight Alliance, who have become part of this incredible campaign. The community has really stepped forward, has been a driving force behind this. Endless petitions, meetings with MPs, film nights, community nights, working with local governments. It's been really incredible to be a part of, really empowering to be a part of.
There are a lot of reasons that we needed an alliance, but one of the main reasons from my perspective is A, these campaigns are so big. You can't do it alone, and you shouldn't want to. You know, it's not just a gift for the campaign to have a really broad range of alliances and people and different types of communities involved, but it's a gift to them to be involved and to be able to affect change. But one of the really important things we realised quite early on is that we actually had quite a number of organisations and people from a range of different walks of life, which is critical for these types of campaigns. But we really wanted an alliance that we could stand together behind and with each other. And so that's really what the Great Australian Bight Alliance was about. And what's been amazing to me is the types of organisations that joined it. I think it became really powerful and really empowering. because we were no longer working just with the usual organisations that have historically worked on fossil fuels. For a start, you know, we were working with councils, we were working with traditional owners and fishing industries and fishing communities and surfing communities, and we were suddenly, before we knew it, working with them all around Australia. Companies like Patagonia joined the Alliance and have been an amazing partner for the campaign ever since. I feel like that was a really important part of the campaign, and I really hope that it stays a really important part of the campaign, because I found it personally extremely inspiring to work with so many people that have completely different skill sets and completely different backgrounds. And you know, watching a notoriously independent group of people like surfers band together and work collectively on something over many, many, many months is super amazing to me.
Well, on the 18th of December last year, Equinor was given approval by NOPSEMA for their environment plan to drill in the Bight, and that was gutting. At one level we knew that that was going to happen, I think, because we were ready. We knew if this was ever going to be approved, it would be snuck through right before Christmas, which is exactly what happened. And then we had 28 days to pull together a legal challenge in the federal court. Going head to head with some of the biggest, most powerful corporations on the planet in the courts is not something you take lightly, but it was so humbling to see our members come out in droves and help support that decision.
So we really identified that consultation was a really critically important part of those regulations. Equinor decided not to consult traditional owners, and they decided not to consult any of the local governments, which we thought was absolutely outrageous. There was no question whatsoever that it was not best practice, what Equinor did, in my view. But I think it was a courageous decision to be able to take that action, and it was only possible because people were prepared to back us in the event that we lost. When you don't have case law, it's really hard to work out just how strong your case is. And when you're dealing with having to take a legal case against not only the regulators of the Australian government and all of their solicitors, or the Australian government solicitor, but also a company like Equinor with the access to very expensive lawyers. If you lose, you pay everybody's costs. We were really confident that we had a really strong case. But the reality is you have to be prepared for the worst in these instances, and that was potentially mammoth. You know, an environment group versus two extremely deep-pocketed potential opponents working together to try to beat you, which is what effectively can happen. You know, without support it would have been almost impossible for us to move forward. So it was really humbling that people had the confidence that we had in the work that we had done over many years, but also in the importance of it. There was the potential, if this approval was acted upon and it went unchallenged, that we would set a precedent that would be used by the Australian offshore oil industry and APIA for years and years to come, that would be almost impossible for us to unwind, which is that big oil and gas wouldn't have to consult any of us ever again. And I have no doubt that if they'd got that principle up, none of us would ever be consulted, ever again. I received an email with the news that Equinor was making a big announcement. Just a little heads up. You know, the first thing I did was have a conversation with Pete and a few other people that were part of the campaign to say, do we think this is it? You know, do we think this announcement is them pulling out? And I think I knew in my gut immediately that we'd done it.
February the 25th will always be etched in my mind as the day probably the biggest domino of the oil industry went down in the Bight. The day the oil industry's dreams to industrialise this magnificent marine wilderness area were stopped by people power, by the community across southern Australia saying, no, you're not going to do this. You are not going to put this magnificent marine wilderness area at risk. You're not welcome here. I still feel like I'm floating.
I have no doubt that the court case was a factor in terms of Equinor pulling out. It's almost an unwritten rule, I think, of the fossil fuel industry and mining vested interests in general, is that if they withdraw, you never credit the environment movement. It is always a case of commercial factors or different corporate strategy, new direction, whatever it might be. They just won't do it. That's just a standard practice. Equinor in Australia said it was a commercial decision. But let's be honest, legal risks, lack of social licence, how easy or otherwise a project will be to actually deliver are all commercial issues. Reputational issues, whether or not you're really factoring in climate change to your decision making. These days, these are all commercial issues. And interestingly, when I was later speaking to both our Norwegian comms consultant, who can actually listen to a lot of the radio programs in Norway as opposed to just print, where Equinor is often grilled much more, but also indeed investors that I spoke to last week have all confirmed that when pushed in Norway, Equinor does absolutely acknowledge that it was a holistic assessment that considered all factors, including the Australian protests and the campaign itself. I would have absolutely no doubt that that was a factor.
This was a David and Goliath battle. This was the community taking on the oil industry. But we knew we could do this. In 2016, BP announced they were withdrawing from the Bight. In 2017, they were followed by Chevron. Late 2019, we saw Karoon Gas pull out. And just recently, we've seen Equinor withdraw from their drilling plans in the Great Australian Bight. So that's the oil industry largely gone now. There's still a whole lot of leases in the Bight that need to be wound up, oil industry leases, and we're calling on the Australian government to do that and to certainly stop issuing any new leases. And now we need to move towards a much higher level of formal protection for the region. Ultimately, World Heritage protection is what we want to see, and that would be the end point. Over 20 years of work, supported by our members and supporters, that have made this all possible to create one of the most amazing conservation estates in the world.